but I thought the smile slipped briefly when his gaze rested on the attractive blonde to my left. The smile quickly returned, however, and he perched on the corner of the long table at the front of the classroom. "Good afternoon, everyone. I am Professor Warriner. Welcome to my course on the history of early medieval England." His beautifully modulated baritone elicited a few more audible sighs from around the room, and his smile broadened. He appeared appreciative of this reaction. He reached for a folder he had laid on the table beside him. "First things first, of course," he said. "Let's get the dull stuff out of the way. When I call your name, please raise your hand." He extracted a piece of paper from the folder and began to read the names. The blonde lifted her hand to the name Dixie Bell Compton. Talk about a southern name, I thought. Dixie Bell. I noticed that Warriner did not look at the students when he called this name. Perhaps he already knew her? That would explain the brief change of expression. So engrossed in contemplating this, I nearly missed my own name. I jerked my hand up, and Warriner nodded. He soon finished his roll call and laid the paper aside. He rose from his perch and went to the board. Here he wrote his email address. Turning back to face the class, he said, "You will use this to submit your written assignments. You will find the syllabus for this course, if you haven't already, on my page in the History Department website. This course requires a substantial amount of reading, some of it translations of primary sources, others are monographs by historians covering particular subjects." He paused to the sound of a few subdued groans. "This course is no sinecure," he continued. "If you don't know the meaning of the word, I suggest you look it up. You will have to work, and work diligently, if you expect to do well in this class. If you aren't willing to work, I suggest you go ahead and drop the class today." He paused for a moment as he assessed the class with a measuring glance. "I am passionate about my subject, and while I don't expect my students to share my passion to the same degree, I do expect dedication to your work in this course. There will be no online instruction in this course. I prefer the old-fashioned methods, and that means I expect to see you in class at every scheduled meeting, on time and ready to participate. Do not be late." Warriner's uncompromising expression did not daunt me. In fact, I admired his standards, well familiar with them from my own college years here, thanks to several of my toughest professors. I had to admit to a certain amount of surprise, however, because of the prevalence of online education these days, and the use of chat rooms and so on for group assignments. I heard the rustle of movement around me. No doubt a few students were squirming a bit, and I wondered how many of them would return for the second class. Might as well weed out the less serious students right away. "Now," the professor said, "on the scope of this course. We begin with the departure of the Romans in the 5th century of the Common Era. We will not discuss in detail why the Roman Empire abandoned its province of Britannia. That is the subject of a course taught by my colleague, Professor Fisher." A hand shot up from the front row. "Yes, what is it?" Warriner asked. I was wondering, a lanky young man said, his words hesitant, "if you're going to talk about King Arthur? I mean, this is the period when he lived, right? Once the Romans left, He stammered to a halt, and he appeared to shrink under the now harsh gaze of the professor. Warriner stood and folded his arms over his chest. He surveyed the room before he again focused on the student with a question. "This is not a course on fantasy and myth. A professor in the English department teaches a course on English folklore. I suggest you take that if you want to read about Arthur and his knights." He paused briefly. "Now, back to reality. There well could have been a warlord in the aftermath of Roman withdrawal who attempted to take control of parts of Britain, but if he existed at all, he was nothing like the legends that have grown up around the fantasy of Arthur." I felt the tension in the room. Perhaps the young man had hit a sore spot with Warriner by asking his question. Based on my own reading, admittedly limited, I agreed with the professor, as much as I enjoyed tales of Arthur and the Round Table.